Pardon? Yes, and I'll put that back. By step with screen captures on how to actually do all of these things that we're going to talk about here today. Now, let's just quickly take a few questions here, if there are any, as we have this comparison up. Are there any questions that you have? How to submit the T4 summary to CRA. So in QuickBooks Online Advanced Payroll, that is done for you. So that's one of the back-end services. I guess, is that the right term to use? That's one of the back-end benefits of WagePoint or Advanced Payroll, that they will do that for you.
Even standard submits it to CRA doesn't have any problems when they receive the T4.
Yeah, yeah. But you have to submit it yourself on the standard.
It's a summary when you do it.
There is no T4 summary.
Right, but when you submit the batch, it essentially gives you that summary. Yeah, you're right. You can save it, a file, and upload it, but yes, it's not as direct as, yeah. Yeah.
Any additional documentation
Right.
you need file.
Okay, I keep going forward by the clicker. Any other questions about differences, I guess you could say? How many of you use standard payroll today? Just with a quick show of hands. Okay. Okay. So about half of you, or maybe even more. All right, so now let's talk a little bit about what it looks like for a client. Okay, so finding the right payroll option. Now, I used to do outsourced bookkeeping many years ago. I'm not that young, I'm not that old, but I did it about 10 years ago. It didn't work well for me, the technology wasn't there, but a couple of clients that we had, I'm just gonna kind of review some of their circumstances and how it relates to payroll, and talk a little bit about how these two companies fit into which option for payroll. So this is an example of, we had a welding shop in Nisku. If you've ever been to Alberta, it's full of welding shops and oil field services companies. Nisku is like the industrial heartland of Edmonton. So you can go to Nisku and there'll be about 500 welding shops there. So we had a client there that they had a very small business, but it was very sophisticated. So they had 6 employees, they had salaried employees, they had a profit share component, they had these semi-annual bonuses. So you can see that they were pretty sophisticated in how they operated. They all had a company truck, which is very common in Nisku as well. So there's 6 employees, and they all had a truck. That's like, everybody gets a truck, which is pretty awesome. They also did, so they did oil field inspections and welding inspections across Alberta. So they would have employees that would go remote into northern Alberta, and so they would get these extended periods of time where they'd be out of Edmonton. So they had a lot of benefits that were really great plan for everything. Like, this is a very, very nice company to work for. So they had RSP matching, vision, dental, long-term disability, everything you can think of, they kind of loaded up. And they also had remote employees who wouldn't come to the office for long periods of time. So they had to have direct deposit. So even though this is a small company, 6 employees, they are the perfect fit for advanced payroll. So we cannot say that small companies fit standard and large companies fit advanced. It really comes down to what they need as far as the individual employees go. Okay. So does that prompt any questions? Or are there any questions around clients that you think of in your own business, in your own firm that fit this type of profile, whether small but complex? I think it's quite common that it happens. Okay, so let me talk about another company. Same kind of industrial type business, but this company cut lawns. That was their main thing. In Edmonton, that cutting lawn season's about 7 weeks long, and so they had a lot of. It was 8 weeks. Okay, so it was, for me, it was like May 21st to August 31st, and then winter came on September 1st. So growing up there, I have some fonder memories of it being summer one day and winter the next. So lawn care is a big thing in Alberta. Large. They had 125 part-time and full-time, but seasonal employees. They were not as generous as the other companies, so they were all hourly. Every single person was an hourly employee, except for the owner and I think some family members. So they even paid vacation every period. So it was really simple for them. They just wanted to simplify everything. They had an end of summer bonus. That was the only thing that they paid out. If you stuck around for the whole 12 weeks or 14 weeks, you would actually get a bonus, which didn't get paid out that often, surprisingly. They didn't have any benefits, so there was nothing in addition to their paychecks. Now, records of employment were interesting because they would give the records of employment when most of the students went back to school or left. At that point, it was, you could give the serial form. It was much more readily available. Today, we do everything through ROE Web, or most of it through ROE Web, but they just needed basic ROEs. And then T4s were an interesting process because a lot of seasonal folks just disappear after they're done, and they don't have a mailing address, they don't have email. So that was a challenge, but they could manage it. Oops. Trigger track copy here. So this type of company, even though it's a large company, they would fit standard payroll quite nicely. Now, I think that they would still be a really great fit for advanced payroll because you've got the employee portal option. So you can give the employee their ROE, all that information through, you deliver that through the portal, as opposed to having to track them down individually. So I still think they're a great fit, but they would be suitable for standard payroll because you can create the basic paycheck needs that they have and use direct deposit or give them paychecks if they prefer. So I just kind of highlight that because a larger company does not necessarily fit advanced payroll. Although I do think they fit nicely, it's not necessarily that fit. Lena?
Matt, I just wanted to clarify, I think you meant to say T4s through the employee portal? We don't
Yes, sorry. Yeah, T4s through the portal. ROEs will be submitted to our Service Canada, yeah, and then they can obviously
But with the
get those later on.
quantity, like I have a number of clients in this industry in Edmonton, the quantity of turnover and ROEs, it would pay to use advanced payroll just for the ROE function to be
Yes.
automated. Like honestly, I would never even give them basic option for the
Right.
system.
And I think that's where we're kind of headed. I don't want to steer you in that direction, but the title of the course is Advanced Payroll. So let's just face it, that's where we're going. But I do want to highlight that standard payroll is a good option, but as soon as you get any complexity or you want the advantages of the portal, it's going to be a better fit for a lot of your clients, I'm sure. Okay, so getting started. So we're going to go through now and we're going to jump into the product and we're going to walk through the 6 steps of getting started. Okay, so we're going to go into, I have what's called a sandbox. It's kind of behind the scenes, and we're going to go through this together. Okay, so before we get started, there is a checklist. I just want to briefly review what this checklist looks like. So this is what you're going to see in QuickBooks. This is a screen capture of the 6 steps. These can take a little bit of time to go through because you can do a lot of detailed setup in here. So the 6 steps as they are listed here, number 1, enter your company information. So that's going to be where you go and enter, obviously, the company contact info, your business number, that type of detail. You're going to enter your payroll tax details, the banking information that you have for direct deposit for your own company, the payroll settings. So this is going to be where you're going to add some details around how the payroll is going to be set up. And then you're going to add employees and contractors at this point as well. Now, adding employees and contractors mean that you're going to add some pay items as well there. So there's going to be a lot more detail on that one step than there will be on the others. And then you have an opportunity to map your chart of accounts. So for those of you who've never used this before, which is probably most of you, you have the ability to go in and set up debits and credits directly in the WorkPoint advanced payroll setup. So that is going to be something that you have more control over. Although standard payroll in the payroll settings lets you go and map a lot of things nicely as well, this is part of the setup step that you can go through and attach the debits and credits as you see fit. So I think that flexibility is another benefit for the accountants and bookkeepers. They want the ability to go in and point things where they want them to go. So let's go into payroll. So I've logged into the sandbox. I'm going to go right from the start and go right from the most basic setup. So I'm going to click on Setup Payroll. And you're going to be presented with this right away. There's the standard versus the advanced payroll, and it's recommended, you can see there. So in this section, I'm gonna click free 30-day trial. Okay, so I'm gonna start that, I'm gonna agree and connect, and that will get me started to the 6 setup steps. Okay, so this is the window that we just saw a minute ago. So we're gonna start by entering our company information. So I'm gonna enter this detail here. So now I've already got some information that's already been entered, so I'm not gonna worry about entering more details. I'm gonna choose British Columbia and see if that will let me. Okay, perfect. So I'll keep this as it is, but this is basic information you're gonna enter for your client. So pretty straightforward. Okay. Now enter your payroll tax details, so I'll click add here. Yep.
It does pull into the file.
Yeah, so that information, that's where this came from. I wasn't expecting it to show up the sandbox like that, but it did in this case, so that will be pulled in. Now here, I'm gonna enter my account number. This is confidential, so don't share this with anybody. Now, I'm gonna choose my remittance frequency. So I have 3 options. I've got the non-accelerated, so the typical small business that's going to remit monthly, and then I've got accelerated threshold 1 and 2. So obviously you'll determine that based on the CRA, I guess, and their determination. So you'll choose that here. Yes.
I have a client who's on a quarterly payroll remittance.
Yeah, just do, I got one.
Okay, tricky question number 1.
At this time, we can only support the 3 options there. We can do a quarterly remittance, so it will default to, like, your only options really, like the non.
Okay, yes, you don't have that option. So, so what would you recommend in that case? Do obviously just the non-accelerated, and then.
Yeah, that's what most of our clients, if they have the quarterly, because we can't accommodate it, they fall for the, like, they use the non-accelerated option.
Okay. Okay, so in this point, I can add workers' compensation. So I'm gonna click add rate right here. I'm gonna choose my province. I can enter, I'm not sure how many digits it is here in BC.
Question back there.
And then I can enter the rate. So let's say I do
Hey Matt,
ice
question.
climbing for a business. Okay. So I will enter my rate there, and that will become a rate. I can add additional rates, so I'm not limited by the one rate. If my company has multiple rates,
I have a question.
I can enter those here as needed. David, you had a question in the back.
What about multiple CRA account numbers, RP 001, 002, and
You have to
multi-jurisdictional? Does it do it, yes or no?
No, each account. We can't, so it only works with a single payroll account.
Yeah, so the question was, can we have multiple payroll accounts? There's only one per subscription, I guess you could say. Is that the way to put it? Yeah. Okay, so that's all you have to do to set up the WCB. You simply add a rate right here, and you can add as many as needed there for the company. Yeah.
On your WCB rate, it's automatically in the background creating the maximum contribution level?
Boy, these questions I never thought of.
It is.
Well,
Great question.
I'm sorry, I'm coming from desktop,
Yes,
so I
no.
have to do that. So.
No, and that's so you're right.
It is,
And this is why it's
in the background, yeah.
it is doing it in the background based on the provincial setup. Okay. Yeah. We should be recording this because that's a great question that I'm gonna write down. It is accruing it, correct? Like we've got there's an accrual that's happening. Yes. We'll check that out at the end to see what that looks like. Yeah. Okay, so good questions. The question up here, just to reiterate, is it accruing it? Yes, it is accruing it. Like we will display that at some point on the balance sheet, right? Yeah. Okay. All right, so that's how we're gonna set up our second step there. So we'll click done, and then we're gonna go back to add banking information. So I'm gonna click add here. Now I don't believe that I can proceed without putting this in, right?
Correct.
Okay, So I came prepared with they're not gonna have a lot of success in this account.
They'll give you a T-shirt if you use your bank information.
Wow, what a good deal. So I'm gonna enter my bank here. Now this is gonna be the company info. I believe it's this. And my account number is going to be. Okay, so then I click I agree to the terms, and then I'll click done. Now at this point, just want to highlight that for a second there. So when you enter this information right here and you and you click done, it is actually going to ping WagePoint, and they're going to send you back. Well, they're going to put a small deposit in your bank account if it's a valid bank account. Obviously, mine's not going to work. That bank account has been closed for about 5 years, but it will. But I did get an email. The good thing about it is that if it doesn't work, you get WagePoint will reach out to you and say, hey, this did not work. Can you please go and do this again? And so whether you've been successful or not, you will know either way. So mine was not successful. WagePoint emailed me from the support team and told me that you need to go back in and make sure that the information is correct. If it is correct, you will see it be put into the bank account, and you will put the amount in here, and then you click complete validation, and that will essentially unlock and let you go ahead and proceed with that. Now that's just like any of the other apps, like Pluto, for example, will do the same type of activity with you. So they're going to verify that the bank account is valid and that it's going to be used for direct deposit going forward. Okay?
Excuse me, can you enlarge the font?
Enlarge the font.
Whoa, that's
Wow.
That's because I don't have an app. Shot across the back. Okay, any questions about this section here? Just to make sure we have that banking information there. Yes?
Are credit also available in the bank?
Yes, it is.
Yeah, so let me just click the drop tab and scroll down, and you'll see a long list of things here.
Yeah.
Want to see Van City? Okay.
What's their?
There you go.
Sometimes they're called different names though, because I know in Alberta.
Hey, awesome. You guys are really excited about Van City.
Shouldn't this be alphabetical?
Am I the only?
No, it's going in numerical order. The bank number is in numerical
Yeah.
order.
But there's so many.
Yeah,
Yes. No, I think that's good feedback. Those are all good things that we learn. I think one of the greatest things about doing this training is that, we learn from you guys as much as we're teaching you. So that's good feedback. Thank you.
It would be nice if you start typing in the name of your bank, and then let's filter it down.
Now you're just pushing it, okay? Right, you're true. Yeah, so yes, I agree with you. Okay, so that's good feedback, thank you. Any other questions about what the process is here for validating our bank account? Yes.
It doesn't have a requirement to upload. Like, and it, like, you use it, it's wage point, and there's like a bar company or this council requires a.
Okay, so the comment is that there's no requirement to upload a void check.
So that's actually coming soon.
It's coming soon.
It is, yeah, the current version, you sort of just do the one-step validation process with the micro deposit, but we're going to be adding some additional validation procedures in QBO AP, but this version starts with just the micro deposit.
Okay, so just for those of you who may not have heard that, so they're going to be adding that functionality where it will be an upload of just a check, or will there be additional information as well?
We're actually looking to make it match the standalone product. To go through a Yodlee verification, which is a third-party product that we use for the purposes of account verification. It's all online and everything is super convenient, so the idea would be to mirror the standalone validation procedure.
Okay, so adding some additional information there.
Where is the third party located?
Yogli, the company, I believe, is in San Francisco. There's, the information that, for Yogli is actually, there's a whole write-up about their security measures and everything, so that you know sort of your data is all safe and secure. And they work with, in fact, a lot of the banks, all the leading banks and stuff like that. So I can send more information about that.
Okay, so I'll click done, and that will complete our banking information. Step number 4, add payroll settings. So we're gonna click add here. This is where the bulk of your work will be done in terms of the setup, okay? So the first thing you're gonna see is you're gonna see 3 tabs across the top. You've got pay groups, which is gonna align closely to your pay frequencies typically. Not necessarily, but that's typically how I see most people use it. It may be management versus hourly workers, field workers, whatever it may be, you can assign pay groups. So that's what we're gonna do first. Second step, we're gonna set up income items. So our wages, salaries, all that. And then third, we're gonna add our deductions, okay? So those are the 3 steps we're gonna go through. So you will click on each one of these or click next and you can move through that and add the items as needed. Do you have a question up front?
I'll wait and see what happens.
Okay, hopefully it's a good thing that happens. Okay, so we're gonna start by adding pay group. So I'll click add pay group. You'll see it lines up to the payroll frequency, so I will call this semi-monthly.
You're missing annual. You need annual.
Yes, I agree, you do need annuals.
Because you have annual along with all your others. You need your annual for
But
your
wait a
others.
second, if you're annual, then you would only remit annually,
No,
right?
no, you.
I don't have any annual payroll.
Your
So
annual.
you can't do quarterly.
Your director's bonus that you're.
Directors are, no,
Because you wanna
you have,
calculate it.
where you have, okay, so I have employees for company, they're bi-weekly, but the owners get an annual salary.
Oh, that
They're-
goes remitted along with
Right,
everybody
so
else.
annual needs to get added into
Oh,
there.
okay. Thought we were gonna have to have a fight in the parking lot.
Marnie would win.
My
That's
line's
all
up,
I'm gonna
Marnie.
say. She's a black swan.
She's got you beat, hands down, buddy. Okay, question up here.
I'll just comment on that
You
one.
do.
It's, even if it's an annual salary, this is just how is it being paid. So if his annual salary is 120,000,
Yeah.
paid monthly.
But he's not.
No, he is. It's a one-time.
No, you're not posting it
For
monthly.
the shareholder loan.
They wanna fight you now. Okay, so what I think we've taken away is that there probably is a good idea to add an annual. I see Lena writing that down, so that's awesome.
Please.
And Andrew has it too, perfect. So, okay, so I'm gonna click, in this case, semi-monthly, and I'll just call my pay group name semi-monthly. Like I said, you can set them up to fit your client's business in any way that works for you. Okay, so I'll click save. And that adds our first pay group. You'll notice it says the payroll schedules, and it defines the number of pay cycles per year.
Matt, can I ask a question? If we're in a 27 pay period bi-weekly year, like that's coming up in what, another 8 years or something?
Or minus 2 negatives.
QBO have that on the back end, because I just noticed when you edit, you can't change the number of pay cycles to like 27.
Right.
So that's just a heads up for 7 years from now or 8 years. It just happened a couple years ago. And a
That's an
desktop, you
8-year
have
plan.
to change
It's a
everybody's.
roadmap, it's 8 years long.
Yeah, so give them lots of-
Okay, so that's good feedback.
It's important, because otherwise the CPP exemption won't apply correctly.
Okay.
At least that's how it is in desktop.
So Dustin, put a reminder in for 2024. Then it gives you 2 years to plan. Yes. That's when they go belly up, so it's not gonna be applicable. Okay, so any questions on that pay group right here? So then I'm gonna click next, and this will take me to income. So this is where we get into adding our income. Now, in this case, there's a number that are set up for you. You've got regular pay, bonus, holiday, so a variety of them are set up for you, and you can add whichever ones you would like at this point. So I'm gonna click add income type. And I need to minimize this, sorry. This is where we're gonna choose the income type, and in this case, we've got a variety of items here. Now this is where if I'm going to highlight the single biggest benefit of advanced payroll versus standard payroll is the flexibility and the additional items that are available to you here. I'll give you an example. The company truck example of my welding shop, I could not do that in standard payroll because there's not even a workaround for that. But I can do that in advanced payroll. I can set up the personal use of our car allowance or whatever you want. And that will give you that non-cash benefit, okay? So that's one of the biggest differences is the pay types in advanced payroll are more sophisticated and they're broader and more flexible in how you can set them up. Yes.
In the desktop version, you're limited to 40 items because the vacation pay will only calculate on 40 items.
Right.
Is that changed in this advanced online payroll that you have more?
Do we know the answer to that one? Like, these are great questions that I never would have thought of. So that's a fantastic question. So number of payroll items allowed.
So there shouldn't be a cap to the vacationable rules for number of income types
Well,
added.
there is in desktop.
But
Sorry,
in desktop,
this.
I think there
In
is
this.
because that's a behind the scenes rule. The way the database is built in desktop had some limitations. But I don't think the online, there should not be the same limitation there
No.
on
And as you
increase
create
point.
even new income types, those rules will be set on the back end. Vacationable, yes, no. But no limit.
So the reason that in desktop, just to give you some context, is when you have that, there's a window in desktop where you'd open up and you'd be able to check those boxes. That was just essentially a line limit, a row limit in that box. It wasn't anything more than just someone didn't think through 20 years down the road, we'd have 150 different pay items. So it's more of a design issue on QuickBooks Desktop versus anything else. Tiffany, you had a question or a comment?
I was just going to suggest to the developers that it would be really great if when we're adding income types, that we have the flexibility of saying whether it is or isn't taxable, if it's pensionable, if it's insurable. We're the professionals, we know what we're doing. So as opposed to, so in my example that I had, is I have a client who required a termination pay, not severance, and I had to require to get done before I could even process payroll.
Yeah, I read about that.
Me too.
So that's good feedback.
Yeah.
So that's the kind of feedback that we want. Thank
So,
you,
I mean,
Tiffany.
in my mind, this doesn't make sense. I mean, if this is for a smaller-ish payroll, why would we have a severance item and not a termination? That doesn't make any
Right.
sense, because severance is only for 10 million companies, $10 million companies.
Oh.
Yes, severance, absolutely, legally,
severance,
is
yeah.
for people with a payroll of $10 million.
Right.
Termination is not.
Wow. David.
The other reason I agree with her, because like with RSP matching contributions, if they're unable to pull them out, they're no CPP, but if they can cash them in, then you must have that. So you need that option to adjust, so.
There's
Yeah.
also the rules on WorkSafe.BC.
Correct.
Because if it's cashable in a union due
Right.
situation, RSPs with
Yeah.
matching, they are taxable
Yeah.
for WorkSafe.BC, but if they're not able to be pulled out by the employee, then they're not.
Right.
Right,
WorkSafe.BC.
so different provinces, different rules, you really need to have that flexibility.
Okay, so
I'll say-
really hard questions.
Great question. Yeah, we.
Why don't should we save that for the panel later, Dustin? What do you think, or do you want to comment on it now? Maybe the panel, 'cause
I'll
then
just
you
comment
vote.
on one thing. So right now within this, there are a preset list, obviously, but there is that button where you can request a custom type. The turnaround is 72 hours. It's not instant, but you can still define the name of that deduction or income or contribution type and specify what the tax rules should be, specific.
But I mean,
I know,
if
it's not desktop, you can't create it
No,
yourself.
no, but I don't mean that. I mean,
Yeah.
if one person needs termination pay, then everybody is going to need termination pay. It's not like that.
I know.
That particular one is a specific
be, like,
thing. It's
defaulted.
a legal thing.
Should be default, yeah, I gotcha.
I think it's also worth mentioning that, come up a fair bit, so version 2 of QBO AP is going to actually give you a lot more flexibility over how these income codes and deductions and company contributions can be configured. So, and we're also going to be adding in the flexibility to indicate whether or not it needs to be included in like a vacation accrual, or if it applies to like workers' comp and things like that. So that flexibility is coming, and like to your point, a few people in the room have had that feedback about that, so it's something we're trying to fix for the.
All right. Okay, so let's start by reviewing how these income types are set up. So we're gonna start with, let's just use control tips. So we would call this tips. Okay. And you will choose an account that you will track this to, I guess you could say. There's whatever you want to use in here. I'm just gonna, actually I may have highlighted something that I didn't do. I forgot to set up a payroll expense account before I started. That's a good idea. No. Shh, don't tell. So I will go out of here, and I will go to my. I will open up my chart of accounts, and I will do that. When you start up a new company, that's something that I would do. I discovered that. And I'll just keep it really simple here. I'm not gonna worry about anything else. Payroll expenses.
Your account's gonna kill you on that cookie.
That's why I don't have an accountant. Named Tiffany. Because I think I would be scared of my accountant. I was like, I'm not going to Tiffany because I haven't done what she told me. Start crying.
But you would never fail in an audit.
Just put it in as ask my accountant. That's
My
the
Okay. Bad idea from David in the back. Okay. So we now have that. I can go back just to highlight. When I go back to employees, you'll see that the items that I've set up. Now, I don't like that it's checked off that box, but I can click edit and I can go back and click on income and then pick up where I left off. So I'm going to go back there. I was going to do tips. Now, you may have a variety of accounts that you use in here. I'm going to just focus right now on payroll expenses. You can set up whichever accounts you wish and track them accordingly. Now, you'll notice below that the tax settings are there. Now, some of the feedback that we've got is, like Tiffany was saying, but also the ability to point these items at specific boxes. So that's the feedback I've seen and heard about. Right now, this defines essentially what is happening behind the scenes. So it says it's taxable, it's obviously payable, pensionable, and insurable. So behind the scenes, these items are hard-coded to those qualities, I guess you could say. Does that make sense? Okay, so you've got the ability to set up any different pay items, and then behind the scenes, QuickBooks is going to point them at specific, or have specific characteristics, I guess I should say. Okay, so I'll click Save. Now I can go and add more. I can click Add Income Type. So let's use, as I scroll down here,
Sick pay.
Sick pay. My thing. Sick pay, there we go. Okay, and then you can see once again everything is yes below that, so we know that sick pay is being set up. Okay. So you can go through and add as many income types as you like that are going to fit the payroll of your client in this case. Now, RSP earned, for example, I'll just keep it simple again.
Are you not able to choose vacationable, yay or nay?
I beg your pardon?
vacationable, yay or nay.
Vacationable.
Vacation pay, whether it's accrued on.
I guess there's an assumption in the background that most things are vacationable, but yes, I don't know.
That's a bad assumption.
minimum, it should be shown here, at least, to tell you
Yeah.
how it's set, yes or no.
Yes or
On the
no?
back end, obviously, the rule is set yes or no, but we need that transparency.
How does your back end know?
I know, yeah. It would be based on the province you're selecting, of course, but again, you can't see how the rule's been defined, right, so.
So behind the scenes, this would, should not be vacationable, is that correct?
Yeah.
Correct.
Yeah.
Holiday pay or stat pay is not vacationable,
Right, okay.
but it's going to be.
In Alberta.
Depends on
In Alberta.
the province.
And BC. I don't know about BC.
Okay, so what we're saying, if we were to summarize what you guys are saying, is you want to be able to see it here at the very least, what the condition is.
Yeah.
And talk, okay. That's down the road. Thank you. All right, so I'll click save here. Now, are there any other income types that you have specific questions about? I'm just trying to figure out some other ones here.
Can I just make a comment? I didn't see salary here when I set mine up, so I requested a custom type of salary, but it's already there in the background.
Yeah, and I actually, good comment, because I noticed the same thing. I was a little bit distressed by that, and then when I went to run a payroll, I saw that information there on the back end. So those most common types of items are there.
Well, I think just salaries there.
Yeah, when you get to the.
And then the predefined
Yeah, so
ones.
these ones right here, these 5 ones right here are there, and then you've got salary, because when you go to pay an employee, essentially there are 6 steps. There's an hourly portion where you enter your hours, then there's a salary section next. And there's already a salary item set up for when you get to step number 4 in the pay employees process. So that's a good call out there, because you don't have to worry about salary, that item is already there. Okay, so our banked overtime. Yes. Yeah. So how do we do banked overtime then? What's the best solution for that?
It'll have to come through as a custom income type request.
Okay, so let's review that now. That's a good time to do that. So if you want to request something, you just click the request of custom income, and you would make these selections here. So we would enter banked, is it hours or just banked overtime, you said? Okay. Okay, so then we would select the items that it was going to be subject to. Okay. Okay. Oh, I see what you're saying. So, okay, so we would set up this item, and then we would select the items, and then we would say which box to point it to on the T4. So I like this window, and then it gives you some flexibility to add items, and you can make the request based on how you want it set up. Okay. So any questions about this right here? So you do have some flexibility to add those, and then it's fairly quick turnaround. Obviously, I wouldn't do it the day that I'm running payroll, but there's that 72 hours turnaround, and that is, so just to clarify, that is unique to your client's file. So it's not it doesn't get created for everybody, so you wouldn't have 5,000 payroll items. It is going to be created uniquely for that client file. Okay, so there is customization there, and I think that's a great feature available. And obviously, that's something that we don't get in standard payroll.
Vacations should be on that checklist as well,
Right.
whether it's vacation.
Yep.
Tiffany, you're becoming very demanding now, so at the break, we might have to. Okay. So that's good feedback. So we want to see vacation. What else we want to see here, Tiffany, from that perspective? Hey, you've got lots of great suggestions.
I've been using it, so.
Oh, yeah, I think it's insurable by WC.
Okay, so if it's automatically turned on behind the scenes?
But how do you know whether it is or isn't? There are comments.
Oh, okay.
Yes.
Okay, so that's good feedback.
Great.
Okay, so this is very valuable information. Thank you. Okay, are there any other income types that you're wanting to know information about? So we've got a variety of ones that are already here.
What about a sick bank, where
employee, yes, they work, they build up time in their sick bank, and when they're sick, they take out of the bank.
So accrual hours essentially, right?
Yeah.
So I guess I would probably request a custom one around that as well, because there's nothing default that is going to give me that type of functionality, unless you guys have another suggestion. That's what I would suggest, is the custom one as well. Maggie?
Okay, I have a question. Well, I just wonder what practice would be if you've got somebody's status in either they work some of the time on reserve and some of the time off reserve, and depending on the arrangement that would indicate whether, and depending on whether it's CPP and taxable and all that stuff. So what would you recommend you do for somebody like that? Would you have what I've done previously in desktop, I've got regular pay status and just regular pay, and then I coded it accordingly.
And I think that's how you probably do it here. So the question is regarding First Nations, right? And then how they, and where they work, and that will determine the type of pay they receive. I would probably do the same thing in here as I would do on the desktop. I think that will work the same way in that way. Okay, so this is going to be a fundamental part of setting up, making sure that you have all of the right pay types, so if necessary for your clients. Now, are there other items that we wanted to talk about here before we move on? Yes.
What about accruing vacation,
Okay, so another question. So accruing vacation pay on vacation pay, what's happening behind the scenes on that one?
The vacation rules, the way that it's set up right now in QBOAP is you have the option to pay it out, accrue with each paycheck, and then or do nothing at all. The system looks at the hire date and the province and then automatically applies all the necessary rules. So for instance, if someone's got a specific hire date, the system will suggest 4%, based on sort of that, or if it's 6% if they've been there longer. So all those rules are configured in the background. And then all the calculations on the back end, if for any reason vacation pay has to be treated a certain way,
Okay.
So is there a table where we can review that, just for our own peace of mind?
I think
Not in the product. That's visible.
I think that sort of
It's a
the
good
main
ask.
takeaway is kind of that you guys want to see a lot more transparency in how things are being done in the background, and so that's where we're trying to get the product to as well. So we can show you guys that everything that you're doing, the impact or the consequence on the back end, so you have that peace of mind. But right now, unfortunately, it's not something we can display to you guys.
Okay, so that's great feedback, and I was gonna say the same thing, so that's good. Okay, yes.
I've got a client that does mid-month advances that they want to pay out through direct deposit. I requested a custom payout, which is fine, so a custom income so I can pay it out. But I can't do a negative income, so if it doesn't.
So you wanna take the advance back?
Yeah.
Okay, so first of all, the way that advance would work, and I've not had a chance to actually go to the second step, but you would have to do an off-cycle advance. So essentially when you set up your pay cycles in advanced payroll, you're going to stick to those pay cycles. So we've set up semi-monthly, we've got 24 pay cycles. So you would go through and you would set up an off-cycle payroll, and you would actually pay the employee through here. On the back end though, we would
I want to pay so they have an advance income and then an advance
repayment, yeah,
Okay.
yeah. So essentially there's a separate item to actually take that back, yeah. But one thing that I noticed, one of the things that I noticed is that you're going to have to do an off-cycle payroll, and obviously the fee would be associated with that.
Yeah, no,
And that's,
because I know
yeah.
some companies, all they do is they just write checks or do e-transfers for mid-month advances, and then they just have a deduction.
Right.
My clients, I want direct deposit every single time.
And that's how you do it in standard payroll. So that's a good highlight. You would do that in standard payroll. You would just go write a check, and then at the end of the month, you would actually take that advance repayment back in payroll.
Right.
So it's how most people do it. You're right. Okay, so now we're gonna click next, and we're gonna go to deductions. Okay, so we're gonna click on add deduction, and we can look at some of the deduction types here. So we've got a lot that are obviously pretty standard across Canada. This is once again where you're gonna get a lot more functionality compared to standard payroll. You really ramp up the options you have here when it comes to deduction types. So let's say that we have a health deduction, okay? And then we are going to assign the credits and debits here, okay? So in this case, we're gonna have, now this is where I guess you're gonna determine how this is set up. So you've got the ability to determine on the back, on each pay item, how these items are going to be tracked in the debits and credits here, okay? So in terms of the deduction, we're probably going to, now this is where I have a question actually, and I probably should have got this answered before. What would we add here in terms of debit? Because if we're taking it off of the employee's paycheck, what would we add here?
Portion.
The employer's portion? You see,
No.
That's
no.
only if they're contributing though.
So this is the tricky one,
Yes, it
pardon me.
actually is
Yeah.
employers,
Okay, so we're gonna go like this.
right?
We're gonna keep it
Because then on
simple
that
for
other
now.
screen is when the yes or no to
You can say
toggle,
yes or no to
employer
match or
column and
not.
employee column.
Yeah,
Okay.
exactly.
Okay, so that's one of the things you're gonna notice when you set up deductions, is you've got the ability to assign the debits and credits on each of these items. That's going to be different than, that's more flexible, I guess you could say, than the standard payroll. Although in the standard payroll, we can point different things to different, I guess, you can have different groups of people that you point different wages at, but here you've got right down to the very debits and credits level. So I'll add that, I can click on add deduction, I can continue on and add anything else. So if I wanted dental, probably set up a very similar way.
So what, but how does it know which vendor to put that against in accounts payable?
Well, if it's already paid, if it's a medical pad, it should be, yeah, it should be adding that expense that we're gonna post to it from payroll down to the page.
Yeah. Now, one thing I didn't do again is I think I need to set up a payroll liabilities account. Yeah.
Question before you done.
Oh, sorry. I'm gonna go back there really quick.
Yeah,
And with the benefits, so I have one I set up, I set one up just last week, and they use Sunlight, so and I'm not sure if I did it right, but we chose Sunlight payable. Right. Because they
Yeah.
have a liability account just for Sunlight.
Right.
You could
Yeah.
create specific liabilities,
Yeah.
payroll liabilities.
Yeah, and then when they pay the bill, when they get the bill, it will
Sunlight.
be offset against that.
That just makes for a long chart of accounts, but
Some
yeah,
accounts.
you can certainly add that level of detail if you want.
Yeah, but it's easy to track.
Right.
Payable or
Yeah.
whatever.
Something, yeah, you could, yeah.
So that's where I guess your preferences will kick in. So let me just go back there, click on deductions, add deduction. So we're gonna enter dental here. So let's use that example. So we have Sun Life, dental, right?
No, I just did it Sunlight, because all of them went to Sun, yeah,
Okay,
medical,
yeah.
dental, and they extended the, life insurance in that way, but that's taxed differently, so it had to use a different item.
Right. So you would go through it, and for each item, you would assign, yeah, whatever account works for each client.
we do it, an example, so if we have a tools, employee got a
Do we have a microphone? It's really
Yeah, we
impossible
do.
to hear him.
Oh, this is working now. Check, check.
Okay. So for a tools deduction, if someone's already paid for the tools, it's already in the expense account, so the credit would be to that expense account, that would go to payroll expenses. However, not taxable, yes, I'm assuming that would reduce the gross pay to which the taxes are based on. Is that correct?
Well, in this case, I think it's kind of weird, and Marty brought this up to me. Because on the income side, you read it and it tells you the tax rules. On the deduction side, like this would be an after-tax deduction. There is no,
Shouldn't affect.
it's not taxable. Yeah, it doesn't affect what
It's
it's
not
saying.
like taxes, yeah.
Yeah.
Right.
In this case, it's telling you, yes, it's after tax deduction, yes, it's, so.
Okay, so
But
that
it
comes
looks
back to
weird,
our,
so.
I guess it comes back to our transparency thing, where we
Yeah,
want to
this
be
is just a
more
wording
clearly
issue
define
around
what it is.
how do we be more clear
Okay.
around what it's doing.
Right.
Yeah.
Okay.
So, sorry,
Yeah.
not to throw it, I'm sure I'm loud enough. So, in my world, what I do for like a Sun Life type of a thing, and maybe I'm wrong, but I find this much easier, is I actually put it back as a credit to my expense account. And the reason that I do that is because the employer is the one who is paying Sun Life, generally on the first of the month as an automatic withdrawal out of their bank account. Therefore, it's not running through a payable account. So you debit the expense account, the reduction from the employee comes through as a credit. Then you don't have to worry about when you're doing your monthly payments that you're pulling a bit of it out of out of a payroll expense account, and the rest of it is the employer's expense account. It's a much simpler and cleaner, and I've gone through a million audits and it's been fine.
Okay, so in this case, you're not going through any
I
payroll
don't hit
liabilities.
a payroll
Okay.
liability account.
And that's, okay, so I've had that
So the
experience.
only time you would do that sort of a thing is if you're doing an RSP withdrawal, like a reduction
Right.
off of the employee's paycheck, because then it truly is a liability.
Yeah, yeah, because most benefits are paid,
Right.
essentially prepaid, like
Right,
for
exactly.
whatever, 2 weeks or the
Month
whole
ahead
month,
for the
okay.
month, yeah.
Okay, so that's a great comment, thank you.
Okay.
So that actually, it actually makes sense more in my
Much
mind,
easier.
like now I feel better.
Yeah.
about this. Me and Andrew were looking at each other yesterday, I'm like, we didn't quite understand how it worked, but that actually clarified it, so thank you. Good feedback. Did someone else have a comment? Did you have a comment? Question? What time are we supposed to break? Are we? Now. Break just in your view, not mine. I can go all day. This is so great.
So, 10 minutes, Matt.
It's 2:30. I just don't want to go over because I might get crucified at that point. Okay. All right, so we're gonna click save here, and we're gonna go add one more. Okay, now I feel better. I'm gonna sleep better tonight. Thank you, Tiffany.
You're welcome.
Let's do the RSP then to kind of round out the other example then. So in this case, this is where we do truly have a liability.
Payroll.
And we may come back to Maggie's idea where you might have a vendor name so that you actually can see it very clearly and pay Manulife or Canada Life or whatever it might be. Okay. And then this is very clear because we have a matching portion. And so that's how we would set up the RSP. Now we probably, and I may put a more clear, like I might put like employee, something like this.
Hold on a second. If you're doing an automatic withdrawal of an RSP off of a paycheck and remitting it directly to, is that taxable?
It's the opposite
Yeah.
of what
It's the
you think.
opposite. It's the opposite again.
It should
Oh,
say
the setup.
reduces tax.
Yes.
Or
Reduces growth.
increases tax. It's a wording thing.
Yes, okay.
Yeah.
We're well
So
aware.
you're saying that, the taxable should say, okay. So
Right.
Yeah.
You're allowed to not have to pay taxes.
Yeah, it should be
Yeah.
an after.
And that's the benefit
So
of that.
taxes withheld? No. Taxes withheld? Yes.
Yes, okay. Yeah.
Or affects taxes, just like desktop, right?
Right.
That's the wording there.
Yeah.
That's the column
Just put
in there.
desktop in the cloud.
I'm on it.
Might get that part. Okay.
Just make it so drilled first.
Okay, so let's just circle that for a second. Desktop is awesome. It's still a part of the QuickBooks brand.
No, I mean the payroll piece of it. It's-
Oh, okay.
It's,
Yes. I think that Andrew touched on this morning where, I think that you bring up a good point because we have had, I worked at Intuit my first job out of college in 2000. Payroll was not as good as it is today. So it's had a 23-year runway in Canada now. So I think we're on that runway, we're just a little bit at the start of the runway versus at the end of the runway like QuickBooks Desktop. So I agree, I think that it's gonna be a good source for us to point back to and say, hey, this is how Desktop does it, let's figure out how we do that stuff online. So I appreciate that comment. Okay, I'm gonna click save. Let's do one more deduction. Anyone else have
Do life.
do life insurance?
Because it's taxed by AD&D.
Or critical illness, any of those.
AD&D.
Life, AD&D, or critical illness.
Okay, you tell me what to do here then.
Expense account.
Yes.
I just happened to guide
Well
towards
done.
that. That was not intentional. Okay, so your same type of setup as before, okay, because you're lumping this in with all other benefits, okay. Yeah, that makes a lot more sense, perfect.
So that, did everybody see that said yes, yes, yes?
It's
Yeah.
not
Yeah.
taxable.
Right, so they know that.
Okay.
So let's go back to that one really quick. So you can edit these, so we're gonna go and exit here. We're gonna click edit, and this will bring up the same window, it's gonna slide open.
Yes.
So we're saying that
I see.
taxable, pensionable, insurable.
Okay.
Okay?
Okay, I have a question. So if you've set it up, as I did, can I now go and change those settings to the item?
And
Okay.
will it change it to what period?
Sorry, can you?
Well, that Tiffany had a great idea, so I love great ideas, so I want to make it now.
You can change the credit and debit.
Oh, yeah.
Oh, okay.
But not, you can't change.
Oh,
the
yeah,
credit.
no, that's fine.
So if you've had a payroll that's happened in the past,
Yeah.
wage point posts it
Right, but I can
as a
delete
journal
it.
entry, so just go back to
Yeah,
journal
we
entry.
can just change
Yeah.
the journal.
Okay, so that's another good comment there.
Or you go through reclassify transactions and everything you've got in the wrong place, you just do it that way through your accountant's tools.
Okay, are there any other questions about deductions? I think this is a natural time to. Hey, why do you guys think I'm not doing the break for myself? I'm doing it for you.
I doubt that, I doubt that. You need a break.
Okay, so let's do one more. Any other questions? So this is a common one in British Columbia. You've got a lot of union payrolls. So we would click union dues. Now, union dues, I kind of come back to what Tiffany mentioned before. So when I choose union dues, are we paying union dues really, is it a liability
Yes.
net of what they're deducting? Okay, so I would have, in this case, I would have obviously an account that would be more suitable, but, right. Okay, so C is that flexibility to now treat complex payrolls more effectively than you would get in standard payroll. Standard payroll, if you contrast this, when you go to set up standard payroll, you have 3 default items. There's RSP and there's health. And you can do a company contribution on those. After that, you're fairly limited. There's a few other ones like regarding deductions, there's union, but after that, you're very limited in what you can add. You can't really have that customization that you've got in here by default, or even add any custom items. David?
Do you have the option to make your deductions either based hourly or fixed?
No, it's just, it's based on an amount. There's no hourly.
Because union dues are usually with unions 2 types of deductions made with unions. One is the fixed and the other is the working hour dues.
Okay.
Yeah,
It's a
no-
very
So you
standard
want essentially a
deduction.
quantity-based.
It's a quantity,
item.
yes.
No,
Okay.
there's no quantity.
So-
It's a percentage.
Okay,
You
there's
can
no
do
quantity,
amount
it's all dollar
or
amount.
percent. It's all dollar, but you can specify amount or percentage of.
Right.
Or percentage, I was, yes, I forgot about that, I'm sorry, I don't.
Okay, so yeah, so what's more common, the hourly or is it the percentage?
It
Just
depends
depends
on
on the
the,
union?
like clack is everything.
Yeah.
Oh, okay.
It's fun.
It is fun. I love it.
Really?
Payroll
No.
is-
I wasn't quite sure. I do love union payrolls.
Like-
Okay. All right, so are there any other questions about, I guess, any of these 3 tabs? We've kind of beat these 3 tabs to death. But I do want to make sure, because these are a fundamental part of setting up payroll. They are going to be the #1 activity that you will do in this setup. All the other stuff is important, but not as important as these 3 tabs. Any other items? Yes?
So, I don't know, you have used this before, but,
Hello, hi, I'm Ken. If you haven't used this before, when I first went through WagePoint, yeah, I set up 2, one for partners and one for staff. that'll create 2 pay runs and double your payroll expense, so don't do that. So if there's salary employees or whoever, when you said usually set up by payroll frequency, keep it to payroll frequency.
Right.
So don't make that mistake, it's $50 out of your own pocket. Don't do it.
Thank you. Okay, so I do think we are close to the break time.
Get me out of here.
We made it, yes, we made it, not me, we made it.